How's everybody going? This is Dwayne Allen with another installment and another lesson from Dwayne Allen Guitar Concepts. And tonight's lesson, tonight, whenever you're watching this, is going to be a two-parter because I think it's kind of it can be a long lesson. So we're going to kind of break it up into two little parts. It's going to be your introduction to blues soloing or blues improvisation for guitar. I'm going to put this one in the intermediate category. So this is going to be for someone has pretty good experience playing songs and chords and different kinds of things like that. I'm hoping that if you're doing this lesson, you have some knowledge of scales and chords a little bit. And one thing that I think you should definitely know is to know how to play different versions of the blues progression, okay, in different keys. Whether it be like a riff or chords or something like that, you should be familiar with how to play a blues chord progression, so that way when you're soloing, you'll understand what the rhythm is that you're playing over. The first part of this lesson, though, I do want to talk about technique and different, basically technical approaches to playing the blues. Different kinds of soloing techniques that are used in all kinds of soloing, whether it rock, blues, jazz, whatever. These are things that you need to know for a lot of the phrases and licks that you're going to eventually learn, okay? Before we get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the scale that I'm going to teach these techniques that they're going to come from, okay? This is one of the forms of a blues scale, and I'm going to teach it in the key of A, okay? Because that's a very, very common key for the blues and for a lot of rock tunes and so forth. So let me teach you guys, if you don't know it already, how to play one of the most popular forms of the A blues scale, okay? So you're going to have your first finger on the 5th fret of the 6th string, and that's the root note, that's the A note, so that's going to be home, okay? Now, let me teach you the scale. I'm not going to go too slow because I know you guys have the ability to stop and rewind. So let's not go too slow with it, but we're going to go first finger on the 5th fret, pinky on the 8th fret, first finger on the 5th fret on the 5th string, second finger on the 6th fret of the 5th string, third finger 7th fret, first finger 5th fret, 4th string, third finger 7th fret, first finger 5th fret, 3rd string, third finger 7th fret, pinky 8th fret, first finger 5th fret, 2nd string, second finger 8th fret, first finger 5th fret, 1st string, pinky 8th fret. So if you play it a little quicker. So that's basically the scale that we're going to use for a lot of these techniques, okay? What I would do is, if you don't know this scale, practice it as much as possible. Try to get it down really, really good, really clean and clear, so that way when we start learning some of the licks later on, you'll see how they come right out of the scale, and it'll make more sense that way. The first thing I want to do, though, is I want to talk about some techniques that you should practice before we get into part 2, okay? These are some techniques that are used all the time, okay? The first one is what we call hammer-ons. So it's basically when you play a note with one of your lower fingers, like your first finger, and you hammer down with your pinky or your third finger or one of the other ones. So for instance, you would do this. So your finger's kind of acting like a hammer. It's coming down fast and hard, just like a hammer would. But you're not picking the second note, so you're doing this. Okay, you want to come down hard enough where that second note is almost as loud as the first note. Let me go all the way across on all 6 strings. We're going to do 1, 4 all the way across. Okay, let's try it with the first finger and the third finger. First finger, second finger. This is something you might want to practice before we get into the licks later on, okay? Let's learn the next technique, and we call these pull-offs. So it's kind of the opposite of a hammer-on. You start with a higher note and you go to a lower note, okay? Now, when you do a pull-off, I actually like to use the word pull down because that's where you're going to really get your best sound, is instead of lifting off like this, you want to pull down like this. That gives it a much stronger sound. Right, so let's practice 4-1 all the way across. Let's practice 3-1 all the way across. And then 2-1. Okay, so we have hammer-ons, we have pull-offs, okay? Another one that I want you to practice, and this is a kind of a big subject area. You can spend a lot of time, we can spend a lot of lesson time on this particular thing, but I just want to talk about the basic idea of it, and that's called vibrato, okay? Vibrato is basically when you're making the guitar sing like this. The blues is a very, very soulful, expressive music, and when somebody sings the blues, they're going to make their voice kind of have a vibrato a lot of the time. So you might go, you know, something like that, right? So you want to make the guitar try to sound like a voice. Now on the guitar, there's kind of like two main kinds of vibrato. There's vibrato that goes this way, and then there's vibrato that goes this way, okay? When you go this way, this is more what you would do for classical guitar, where it's more of a subtle thing. That's not what you want to do when you're playing blues guitar. When you play blues guitar, you want to go this way, so you're shaking the note. And the thing with vibrato is it really is the trademark of any great player, and every player has their own style of vibrato, okay? So you have to find your style and your sound of how you want to do it. There's the way B.B. King does it, or the way Jimi Hendrix does it, or the way Eric Clapton does it. They all have their own style. So, you know, that could be a whole other lesson. But basically, a great way to practice vibrato is practice the notes of the blues scale that I just showed you, but do it where you're giving each note vibrato, okay? The important thing with vibrato is to be even with the way you're kind of going up and down, but make sure you don't do too much in either direction, because that'll make it kind of out of tune like this. Right? It's kind of awful sound, right? So you want it to just be nice and even. This is where you got to really use your ear. Your ear will tell you if you're doing it like that. Oh, it sounds like you're scratching a chalkboard. But your ear will tell you how the intonation should be and how wide you can do it. You could go slower. You could do the B.B. King vibrato, right? So there's different ways of doing it. Experiment and see which sound that you like the best. So you could practice it like this. Just try to make it sing. Maybe try faster vibratos, slower ones. It's something that takes a lot of practice to get good at. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about, which is also takes a lot of work, is bending. Bending is when you're taking a pitch and you're bending it up to go to a higher pitch. So if I'm playing this note, I'm going to bend it to the pitch of this, the sound of this pitch. So I'm going to go like this. Okay. Now bending is a whole other art form that we can talk a lot about, but I just want to show you the basics of it. So I'm using my pinky on the first string on the 8th fret. This is one of the notes in the blues scale. And I'm using all my lower fingers to help push up that particular note like this. Now, even though these notes are helping to push up, this note is still the most important one. So my pinky has to do most of the work, but the other fingers are just there to help get it higher, okay? Now, when you're bending, you want to bend to a specific pitch, and you want to make sure you're in tune like this. If you go too high, it gets sharp and it sounds terrible, like this. Right? Too much, or it might be too flat. Right? Doesn't sound good. So when you're practicing bending, you should check that higher pitch so that you know how far you want to go. You could do it on the second string with your pinky as well. You could do it on the third string. You could do it on the third fret. Third finger. So it would be on the 7th fret with your third finger. And when you bend with your third finger, you're going to let your lower 2 fingers help to push. So you're going to go like this. So I went from here to there. So you can practice. Now, most of the time when you're bending, you're only going to bend the high 3 strings, okay? And whenever you're bending, you want to bend away from the edge of the fretboard. So if the fretboard is down here, we want to go up this way. If you're bending the lower strings, since the fretboard is here, you actually want to bend downward in this direction, away from the fretboard. So I might go. Right? Okay. So those are the techniques that you should practice and get comfortable with. You might want to work on them for a few days or a week before we get into part 2 of the lesson, where I'm going to show you guys a few simple licks. I'm just going to do a short solo over my little cheesy blues backing tracks, and I'm going to use all these techniques just to show you what they sound like in practice. Bending in vibrato. Some hammer-ons. Some pull-offs. Something like that. So as you can see, I was doing a lot of bending, a lot of vibrato. I was doing some hammer-ons. I was doing some pull-offs, okay? You probably noticed I did go outside that A form there. I couldn't help it. I get bored and sting in one area, but we can talk about all that later. But so practice those techniques, get comfortable with them. If you do get comfortable with them, then I'm going to show you some basic blues licks, and I'm going to show you how to put everything together, okay? So practice that A blues scale, practice these techniques, and I'll see you for part 2. Thanks.